Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to make 3 no-fuss Christmas card projects. If you don't want to make cards, you can turn this into an art journal page. So we are going to be using this adorable napkin, Beth and Tilli, that I got from NINNYSNAPKINS.com. I am just simply rough cutting it out just to make it easy, and then I'm removing the plies, and I just simply put water on my fingers and tap tap tap, and the excess plies come off. Then I'm going to take my liner brush and a little bit of water, and I'm going to water cut the excess off. This is gray, and since I don't know what color background I'm going to be using, and I just want to get rid of this. I also want to get a deckled edge, which works really well with the sheep because there's nothing specific. It's not necessarily a hard edge. So I'm just randomly putting on here. I'm not too worried about following exactly what's there. After all, I am going to be over painting this a little bit. But if you don't want to overpaint, just extra simplify things. Using the water cutting technique here, instead of cutting it with scissors, will probably give you a better result. So I go very slowly, and you use a very little bit amount of water. Then I'm going to put it on. We're going to make a 5x7 card. Now this one I cut with scissors and I got that straight edge, which I didn't like, which is why I ended up water cutting the excess. So as I said, we are going to make a 6x6 card, a 5x7 card, and a hanging on a wood panel. So for the first one, I am just using an instant background using a gel print. This has the red in it, there's a little bit of black, and there's some gold. So it's the perfect accompaniment. So when you don't want to fuss and muss, get out paints, using gel prints or collage papers that you already have in your stash is a great way of cutting the time. So for this 6x6, I end up cutting this, I believe it was 5 1/4. That gives me the nice white border, which I really like on my cards. If you don't like that, then you can make it 6x6 and go edge to edge. I'm just trying to position where I want the napkin to go based on what patterning is in the gel print. I put my card in a pocket to keep the outside of it keep it clean, because I am a messy crafter. And then I'm gluing this down with fluid matte medium. And I'm even sealing on the card base. And of course, in between, I am drawing it all up. Now, I am going to put my napkin focal image over here, but if I glued it down with the dark background, the white of the sheep is going to get discolored. So I am going to lighten where the sheep are, and I'm just using my Stabilo All pencil in white. You could use a watercolor pencil or even a chalk or even a pencil to mark where that is. I like the white because it's easy to see. And then I'm just going to take white gesso and white out where I'm going to glue the napkin. Now, because it's sheep and it's woolly and I don't need necessarily a straight edge, I'm not overly worried about making this so perfect. I do come back and I give it several coats, drawing in between. And I'm trying to, pretty much stay within where the sheep is going to go. If you're putting multiple layers of gesso or paint down, one of the things to remember is dry it in between instead of globbing it on. I just want to say I am not a card maker, so cutting cards and measuring and all the fussiness of card making isn't for me. So I'm always looking for the quick, easy. So I could have done a green background with this, I could have done gold, I could have done a multitude of colors with this very neutral focal image. And there you can see that the sheep, the wool of the sheep has maintained its white color. Then I'm gluing it down with the fluid matte medium. And you'll notice that I glued the sheep kind of over the edge into that white border. I like that overhanging look. I found the sentiment, "We wish you a Merry Christmas," but you could really put any sentiment you want. You matter. And I'm just cutting it apart to fit the size. If this was on a 8x10 panel, I might use a bigger font or add more texture. So take the basics that I'm showing you and use it on a background or a substrate that you like. You're not limited to just doing a 6x6 card or a 5x7 card. Now I'm just tweaking the colors a bit, and I've got some black paint that's thinned down, and I'm just ever so lightly adding, making it a little bit more contrast. Without changing it or painting completely over it. The next card that I do a background completely different. Now I'm taking white paint and I'm just dabbing it on where the wool is. And again, I'm not being overly specific with trying to match it with exactly how it was with the napkin, because it's wool. It doesn't matter. And this is where I hide the edge. So even if you chose to cut it out instead of water cutting it, dabbing the gesso or the white paint here over the edge will camouflage that. Now I'm shading around. Using black acrylic paint. And then shading a little bit around the focal image as well. Now each of the projects, I'm going to colorize the sheep in a very similar way. Each one ends up a little bit different. So I will extra speed those parts up or omit them in the next two projects. There's some holly up here. So I'm just painting that out with green and then red for the berries. Now from the one napkin, you can make 4 different cards. And I would do them assembly line. Here I'm going from beginning to end, but I would just do all the backgrounds, then glue all the sheep down, do all the sentiments. Now I'm outlining with my Sakura glaze pen. It's glossy and it's dimensional, and it adds that little bit of shine to cards, and I really like using it on my cards. If you've never used a Sakura glaze pen, you really want to try it. They are so easy to work with. And then I'm adding a little bit of detail here with some stitch work with the Sakura glaze pen. So now let's move on to project number 2. This one is a 5x7 card, and I've taped it down and glued it onto some foam core. And I marked at the top, that's where the fold is. I want to keep track of where the fold of the card is. So this time I'm not going with an instant background. I'm going to paint the background in. And quite honestly, this is just as easy. Now this time I'm marking where I'm going to glue my focal image, because I'm not going to paint underneath there. Now the napkin had a gray background, so I'm just going to make a very neutral grayish background. It worked for the napkin. Why recreate the wheel? Reinvent the wheel. And I'm using gray and a little bit of black and a little bit of white gesso. And as you can see, I am not fussing at all here. I'm just globbing it down, quite honestly, not being very careful. This is just the base coat of color. We're going to add some layers to this. And I'm painting this right onto the raw cardstock, or raw card. And I think this 5x7 card was just a cheapy card. It wasn't anything fancy. It's not a watercolor card. I will be doing more Christmas cards. I have so many napkins from Ninny's Napkins, beautiful Christmas napkins, and I'm hoping to showcase different techniques and different ways to use napkins on cards. I want that gray background to kind of show between the legs of the animals. I have this random bubble stencil that I will be using in a minute, but I wanted to add some of that green and red from the focal image, there's very little, into the background. So I'm getting a little bit of that on a makeup sponge, and I'm just ever so lightly rubbing it on. I don't want a lot of color. I just want a hint of it just to tie everything together. And again, I am not being picky. Here I'm grabbing some green and adding just that smidge of green in. And if it gets globby, I'm just tapping it out, adding more white gesso, adding more gray. As I said, no fuss. And then I'm coming in with white paint and this random bubbles stencil. And I think it kind of looks like snow falling. I'm looking back at this gel print that I had. I thought, oh, maybe I could add a border of that. Add a little bit of red in there. Then I decide I'm going to splatter with some green. So I use the one excess ply of the napkin to mask off that area. I don't want the color underneath where I'm going to glue the sheep. And then I splatter with red and make sure that that gets a good dry. Got a couple spots there. Just put some gesso on so it doesn't bleed through the napkin. I take off the tape, so I have my nice white border, and then I'm gluing the sheep down, again going over the edge. And fluid matte medium. So a lot of what's coming next is stuff that you've seen me already doing. A lot of the finishing techniques are universal. For the third project, I'm going to be working on an inverted wood panel. So once that's dry, I'm just going to cut off the excess. And make sure that it is completely adhered. Add a little bit more of matte medium. I like doing these cards because they are, you know, kind of one of a kind, and people sometimes frame them. They can pop this into a 5x7 frame and there you go. This one I'm adding a little bit more gray to the sheep, and again adding white. It could be any combination of gray, white, black. And then I'm going to shade around. Got a little bit out of hand here, so we'll just wipe it off. And see how the shading gives it, just makes it pop. And then I'm colorizing like you saw me doing with the first one. But you could skip that step. That's not 100% necessary. It's what I like to do. Go with your comfort level. There is a link in the description box below for Ninny's Napkins, where you can get the napkins, stencils, and other mixed media and art journal supplies. I cut out the saying Feliz Navidad, and my idea was that I was going to paint the letters red. But I had that gel print and I thought, oh, I'm just going to put that on there. I needed that a little more color on my background. So I just made a border around my sentiment. And this one says Feliz Navidad. Have the positioning, so now I'm just going to glue everything down again with my fluid matte medium. Then I'm shading around the sheep, just to give some definition. And add the fluffiness back in. Secure a glaze. I'm outlining the sentiment. More stitch line work. Which really works well with this one, because actually the font there actually has the stitching on it, making everything go together. So there's project number 2. So project number 3, I'm using a wood panel. Actually, this is one I got from Dollar Tree that I just painted out. So it was $1.50 here in Canada, and I am using the inside, which is going to add as a frame, just to show you that this doesn't have to be a card. Now, I love the way the red pops with our fairly neutral black-white focal image. So I am going to paint this frame red. And I start out with a brush, but I'm getting a lot of brush strokes. So I end up grabbing a Ranger blending foam, and then I paint with that. And I do give it a couple coats because I want that deep red color. And in the end, I will paint the backside. As you saw, you could still see through. I did gesso the entire frame. Lots of times I get these frames and I do a gesso session. I take it out on my dining room table and I just gesso everything. So that step's done. And then I don't have to stop while I'm start creating. It makes the creative part go a little bit faster. I wanted to paint the inside red, so I'm grabbing the brush and I am doing that. I'm thinning the paint down a little bit, and I'm using an angle brush. I find an angle brush really gives me that straight edge, and I want to avoid as much as possible getting on the white part on the background. So once that's done and dry, I am adding some grunge and darkening that red by shading on all the edges, on the front, on the sides. This kind of grunges up. It also hides the imperfections, any stroke marks that are there. And it deepens the color of the red. I don't show me doing all the sides, but you can see this does make a difference. Then I want to add a little bit of detailing on the edges. So I grab this Mania stencil and I'm stenciling with gold. And I'm not worried that it's imperfect. I like that look. And I just work my way around. I also end up doing this on the front side just to add a little bit of gold there. Then I splatter. Now here I should have glued the sheep down first because some of those splatters came through. In the end, when I overpainted it, it didn't matter, but if you had splattered with a darker color, it may have mattered. Gluing it down. So the background I just kept white. How simple is that? White with gold splatters. And then I took the Feliz Navidad and I used a script, and it gives a whole different look to it. Grabbing the Sakura glaze, and I'm adding the stitch work all the way around the frame. So this is what I mean about take the steps and do it on whatever substrate you want to do it on. I don't know that I would use this one napkin on anything bigger than an 8x10, but I would put it on an 8x10. Then I would add some texture and more to the background because more of it's simply going to show. And that finishes project number 3. All in all, this took about an hour and a half from start to finish to do all 3 projects. Which one is your favorite? I know there's a lot that's the same, but they're different. Come back to my channel and see more Christmas cards being made. Until next time, go get creative.